we, as humans, our brains are limited. We can't remember everything. So if you think about the context of a customer journey with a brand, we're not going to remember the whole thing. So as humans, what we do is selectively, our minds remember selective points along that journey.
Today, we are excited to have Ariane Radman on the podcast, who owns Ignite Post. So Ignite Post offers a really unique service that harnesses the power of personalization, something that's going to be extremely valuable to everyone listening to this with an e-commerce store. And they use handwritten notes to elevate customer engagement. So really, really interesting. And in this digital world, I think it's something that can offer you a unique advantage. So Ariane, it's great to have you on board for you to share your insights.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to dive into it and get into all the goodies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we dive into the specifics of Ignite Post, your company, could you give us an overview of what prompted you to start the service in the first place? Like, what's your background? How did this all start out?
Yeah, so my background is actually in software engineering. And so prior to this, so Ignite Post is actually my second company that I founded. But the company that I started before this was a two-sided marketplace called CoachUp that was connecting athletes and private coaches in a bunch of sports all across the nation. I got the first ideas that would eventually become Ignite Post actually from working at CoachUp. And what I realized is that it was the relationships between the coaches and the athletes that made the most successful kind of pairs and bonds. And so the folks that we saw that performed the best on that platform were the folks that developed that relationship the most. And so what I saw there, combined with some of the marketing, the market trends, really led me to start Ignite Post. So the trends that I was speaking about and that I saw is really this kind of concept of a lot of digital saturation. There was a couple of like major trends I saw. Number one, everybody was super saturated digitally. Digital ads, push notifications, but all emails, all kinds of things. And I didn't see that trend slowing down. If anything, I thought it was going to get worse as we moved forward. And then to couple that, the other trend I saw was that this concept of people distrusting brands and actually trusting communication from their peers more so than communication from an actual business or brand. And so, that was evident because what's the first thing you do whenever you hear about something new is you go and you ask around, hey, has anyone ever used this? Or you look at reviews, right? So that was holding more weight than communication coming from the actual companies themselves. And I saw those two trends accelerating and not slowing down. And so I said, all right, if I'm trying to project, 10, 20 years down the line, and I think that those two trends are going to accelerate and be worse, what are the tools that brands are going to need to use so that they can basically combat those two things, so that they can cut through all this digital noise and communication? And when they do actually reach their target audience, how can they develop that relationship better so that they can develop a relationship with their customers at scale so that they can turn first-time users into people that come back and purchase again and again. So that was the whole high-level concept behind why I started Ignite Post. And Ignite Post is designed to do exactly that. So we are a real pen and ink handwritten note solution that is designed to enable brands to reach their target audience at scale. So we work alongside your existing marketing automation tools, but instead of sending more emails and more digital communication, people get an actual real pen and ink handwritten card that looks like this. That's actually really handwritten, that looks authentic, that develops that relationship more and builds more trust and builds more of that relationship with the brand. So that's kind of the quick overview of my background and why we do what we do and why we specifically chose the solution that we went with.
That's incredible. It's great to see the example card that you shared there. And it's funny, I remember an interview that we had a while back with one of our members at Dropship Unlocked, Jared, and he told me something that he'd done personally, in the old-fashioned manual approach, I guess, where he had written handwritten notes to every customer after they'd purchased and had an influx of nice Trustpilot reviews and things off the back of that. And so I guess what your service offers is that at scale in a really automated, hands-off way, which is incredible if we can do that without having to spend all day with a pen. I know I'd get cramp after writing about 3 or 4 of those notes. So I don't do too much writing by hand these days. So it's really interesting to understand our customers' mindsets, right, when they're purchasing from our e-commerce business. In your experience, why do you think that customer engagement, especially through these like personalized methods like handwritten notes. So that's about as personalized as you can get, right? Why do you think that plays such a pivotal role in today's e-commerce business world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at a core, it's really who we are as a human species, right? If we look at human evolution, we're not really designed to be in front of screens. Like we're in front of computer screens now, but that's like, a very, very super new advent, right? If we look at humans and how they've evolved over time, humans learn about their environment by interacting with it, by kind of touching, feeling it. In fact, I always like to bring this up, a really cool thing. So a couple of years ago, the Journal of Vision actually did this study, and it was a marketing study where they separated folks into two groups of people, and they let one group of people visually see a bunch of advertisements. They couldn't interact with it. They could just visually see it. And then the other group of people, same set of advertisements, but they were able to kind of pick up and interact with the advertisements. They were able to, read it, feel it, touch it, smell it, everything, like really experience it. And what they found is overwhelmingly that second group of people that were able to actually interact with their environment, interact with those advertisements, they understood the advertisements better. So they kind of comprehended better. They remembered it longer, and it lasted, it had a bigger impact on them. Same thing. The only difference was they were actually able to like interact with it. So that tells us that who we are innately as human beings, that kind of tactile feedback is hugely important, right? So that's kind of one big piece of it. So understanding the kind of, whole experience and customer engagement, there's only so much you can do if all you're relying on is just digital communications and putting people in front of screens. You're missing out on the whole reason why humans are the way we are and how we're built the way we are. So that's kind of the thing that people always forget, is that, this digital environment that humans have created is like super new. Humans have been around for like millennia, but it's so foreign for us as creatures to interact digitally like this, like, on a computer screen. So that's kind of like the first thing that I'd say that you really need to remember. It's just who we are as humans and how we got here. So when we talk about customer engagement and why it's important to have other touch points instead of just, throwing, digital communication at folks, it's important just because that's how we've evolved over time. It's built into our DNA that we understand things better, that we can touch and feel and interact.
That's fascinating. And it really is easy to forget that, right? Where we kind of take for granted when we spend so long with computers these days that this is a really new thing. Like we did not evolve to end up in this position. And I mean, one of the things that, when there's certain brands that invoke an emotion and they kind of, they pull you in on a deeper rooted sense, maybe not through just the traditional visual sense, but like the brand that always springs to mind for me is Abercrombie and Fitch. You walk past their store on the high street and it's like that wafting fragrance they waft out of the AC.
You can smell it.
And it's, you
there's
one
before
near.
You see it.
You do, yeah. I walk around, I'm like, there's one there. I know there's one around somewhere, which is like tapping into a deeper level of the brain, I imagine, than the kind of the surface level visual concept that we take in. So that's really interesting. And I love the tactile approach, because as soon as you get something through the post box on your door and then you see it's handwritten, and I always study it because sometimes the estate agents send out those notes and you're like, is it really handwritten? And you see and you're like, this is real, like a person has done this. And it's fascinating. I think it makes you pay attention, and you probably wouldn't throw that away, because I'd probably be like, I'm going to show my wife that later, or I'm going to show someone else, because it feels wrong to throw something like that away. So let's talk a little bit about the customer journey if we can. Because from your perspective, like a lot of our members will use Shopify for their hosting of their e-commerce platform, their store. And then they'll often use something like Klaviyo for their automations. Usually it's just emails and texts, but obviously Klaviyo is so much more powerful than that and can do so much more, especially if you incorporate Zapier and things like that as well. What are some key areas that you see businesses like ours often falling short in terms of customer engagement, and how do handwritten notes fit into this customer journey?
Yeah. So by the way, that tech stack is something that we see super common. So our solution is actually built to be dropped in right alongside of their flows and everything that they have set up in Klaviyo. So that's kind of the caveat. We're talking a lot about like the tactile feedback and sending something physical through the mail. But remember, nothing happens in a silo these days, right? It's all about creating an omni-channel experience, because let's face it, people prefer to be communicated with in different ways. So the way our solution is built, it actually works alongside marketing if you have those kind of tools set up in Shopify and Klaviyo. So that's kind of like the one caveat there. But in terms of enhancing the customer journey and kind of where people should be thinking about, I always like to dive into the science and kind of psychology behind it. When you're thinking about crafting a customer journey, those are the things that get you the most bang for the buck. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time working with brands on is something that we call the power of personal, and really humanizing your brand to connect your brand, the people behind your brand with your customers. And there's actually, this is scientifically backed, that if you can bring that out, if you can bring the people behind your products out and connect them with your customers, that they do a couple of things. It retains them better. So it boosts your revenue. It allows you to charge higher prices, and it keeps people coming back again and again. It's scientifically backed. And that's because the way that we've purchased things over time has changed, right? If you think about it right now, you can go to, Amazon and buy a blender, and it'll show up on your doorstep, and you don't have to talk to anybody at all. That is super different than how things used to work in the past. Way things used to work in the past, let's say you wanted a piece of furniture, you wanted a chair, you'd actually go to the artisan. This is like, a couple hundred years ago. You would go to the artisan and say, hey, I need a chair. And you would actually talk to the person that would build and make you the chair. And that felt good because you had that human to human interaction. So that part has kind of been removed from business. So when we talk about the power of personal, we see a lot of brands, and we kind of push a lot of brands to use these handwritten notes to inject that power of personal and connect the customer with the human side of the brand. And so anywhere that you can do that, anywhere that you can kind of bring that forward, is a super important thing to do. I'm happy to go into like some examples, but we've definitely seen a really good results from folks doing that, especially post-purchase. So you mentioned about the user that you had, the person in your community that would send the actual handwritten note after somebody made a purchase. That's a great example. We see that a lot. Setting up a post-purchase flow whenever somebody makes a purchase for the first time, or just an important touch point. That's something that is super important to kind of bring the personal side of your brand or business out. So, and that will not only connect them with the personal side of your business, we've also seen it mitigate negative things from happening. So we've had a lot of examples where the wrong product has been shipped, or there's been, a mess up in terms of, their order and what they received. And I have literal examples of people saying, hey, like, you shipped me the wrong thing, but by the way, I got your thank you note. Really appreciate it. Can you just like send me the thing that I actually ordered, and like I'll keep this, so just like recharge my card. So there are tangible things for sure. And then there's also elements like that are hugely impactful that a lot of times people don't quantify and measure. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into that. So there's that, which is like the power of personal and bringing that out. And when we talk about the customer journey, the other element in terms of using science and psychology that we also really push brands to think about is what we call peak end theory. So this is just how our brains work, right? We, as humans, our brains are limited. We can't remember everything. So if you think about the context of a customer journey with a brand, we're not going to remember the whole thing. So as humans, what we do is selectively, our minds remember selective points along that journey. And that's what we remember to kind of craft the whole thing and understand it. So knowing that, we can actually craft an experience where we influence how the journey is remembered. And the theory called peak end theory, which again is a actual scientifically backed theory, says that you really remember two things along the course of a journey. You remember the peak moment, so like something that's like very, very intently, powerfully memorable. And then you remember the end of the journey. If you ever go to a concert or like a concert festival, that's why the headliners always come at the end of the festival, because as humans, you remember the last thing. Like that's how they position it, so that you walk away from it being like, oh, that was so awesome. If they put the headliner to start the show or in the middle of the show, you wouldn't remember it as much. So using peak end theory, you can do this in your customer journey. And so we work with brands and we say, let's take a look at your customer journey. What is one particular area that we want to make extremely memorable? And then where is there, the end of the journey? And those are the two areas that we really focus on. And if you do that, that's where you end up seeing the most ROI and the most return. So, it's using a little bit of science and psychology, using our product, but then strategically picking those areas to like really, really focus on.
It's such a good targeted approach, isn't it? Rather than just hoping and sending out notes whenever you think it might be relevant, using hard science-backed theory to say, these are the most impactful moments in that customer's journey. This is where we want to kind of to impact their emotional connection with the brand.